an animal disturbs it psychologically.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know that I could disagree with that. If somebody was hunting me, I might be disturbed psychologically.
Well, that's true. That's true. That's true. But that's just the thing is if somebody's hunting you. So say you're a deer in the hills of Texas.
Yeah.
So um,
Texas has the largest population of deer.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and we also have cougars,
Cougars.
and cougars hunt deer,
Puma.
and yeah. So yeah, I'm not of the mindset of like well, I'm not super concerned about the psychological well-being of a deer unless it's just being terrified. But yeah, so we could talk about a lot of this, and I know that you and I have some different viewpoints on some of these things, but uh, I know we're recording already, but I just want to say that I believe there is a difference. There's a difference from just going out and killing things. Um, so as our conversation goes into or goes further, I believe in hunting for food, not for a trophy.
Hmm.
If you're not going to eat what you shoot, then you shouldn't be shooting.
Hmm.
With the exception of, and it's a narrow exception because, um, you know, uh, like in hogs, let's use the hog.
Hmm.
Predominantly in the state of Texas. I mean, it's all over the country, but we'll just talk about the state of Texas. So in hog hunting, uh, hogs are just feral. The population of hogs has just exploded,
Yeah,
and
they reproduce pretty fast.
so they have just their population exploded, and so while sometimes it's it's characterized as sport, and but the bottom line for most hog hunting in the state of Texas is really to protect farmland. And so there are people out there who trap them,
Yeah.
but
So
the trappers,
that would be one aspect of conservation. So hunting feral hogs is the conservation of
of
property
their
and
population.
agriculture. Property
Yeah,
and
yeah, for
agriculture.
absolutely.
Yeah.
However,
We're
think
not
of it.
trying to we're not trying to conserve the feral hog population. We're trying to conserve private property
Yes,
values
yes,
and agriculture costs.
absolutely. So conservation means a careful preservation and protection of something, especially planned management of a natural resource to prevent exploitation, destruction, or neglect, water conservation, and wildlife conservation. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. And so, for example, I'm just going to further that is that in with hogs, they destroy thousands of acres of farmland a year.
Mhm.
And to the uneducated, they're going to go, oh, well, how can a handful of hogs? We're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of hogs. And so, and then there's a lot of folks that in some urban areas where feral hogs come into urban areas and uh, communities hire trappers to trap them. Uh, that's much more detailed. That's much more time consuming, much more manpower intensive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes they release them back into the wild, which does nothing to conserve and to control the outgrowth or the growth rate of the hogs. Or other times they sell them to uh, meat packers, and those hogs are prepared and sold for meat. So
Mhm.
either way, so for this, I know we could probably use this this is going to be used in our podcast, obviously, but at some point I got lost in an article by Psychology Today. And I don't know if you guys didn't hear it, but Coach Lambie and I were talking about the psychological impact of being hunted, stalked, on the animal. But I don't know what's worse, you know, a single shot to a hog or trapping it and carrying it around, hauling it around in a truck. I think that would be way more stressful for a hog in the event of trying to protect farmland, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. I'm not so worried. My wife and I got in this conversation. Not so worried about the golf course. You know, maybe some people put a value on that they're losing tons and tons of money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's okay. I get it, but I'm more worried about farmland and people growing food, et cetera, et cetera. That's
Mhm.
that's that's the side of that fence I'm on. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a
whenever a population of animal, well, even people, any any living creature, my research has shown this is that as a population grows, there becomes a higher rate of disease, and then that disease can spread quickly. For example, in Austin, Texas, I think it was Lakeview Golf Course or something. Anyway, so they had an infestation of rabbits, and the rabbits grew and grew. The population of them just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And the larger the population of any animal, any species grows, then there's a higher and higher percentage of the introduction of a disease, or um, I can't remember the disease that the cat or the rabbits contracted, and it spread through their population. But that disease also was transmitted to humans, and so now it becomes a health concern, and for the conservationists, obviously for the rabbits, but more so, kids, adults were getting this disease. Um, so what had to happen? They had to cull the population of the rabbits. That's just something to think about. How about
Yeah.
that?
There's a number of diseases that rabbits carry.
Deer also.
Rabbit
Deer.
fever,
Deer. Yep.
um, my myzoma,
Yep.
myzoma
Yep.
virus.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a number of things that there are a number of the larger the herds of deer, um, the, there's a greater transmission or greater growth of they get prions in their brain and spreads to their body, and then that if you eat that, if you kill the deer and you eat the meat and you don't prepare it properly, then you're going to be one sick puppy. Um, so yeah, there you go.
I think it's basic food safety and handling.
Absolutely, absolutely,
If you don't cook any animal products properly, then you're going to end up with
absolutely,
problems.
absolutely, absolutely. And some are more wicked sounding than others. If you don't process pork correctly, you're gonna have a brain worm.
Yeah.
You're gonna be in some serious trouble. Yeah.
So
Anyway,
as as I was having this discussion with a rather
militant.
militant individual online, we did not discuss any of these topics. So it more had to do with what people would consider to be normal, or I don't know if you'd say normal, but the colloquial, versions of hunting deer, elk, all of that
Right.
stuff. And the question was whether or not hunting is conservation for wildlife. I guess feral hogs count as wildlife. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. And then
You're not going to go out there and pet one.
then the aspect of that I didn't think about before you brought it up is like, well, what is it that we're trying to conserve?
Right.
And so in the case of most wildlife,
Did you see the light?
Christy just walked in and she was like, uh, yeah. So in the case of most wildlife conservation efforts, we're essentially looking to conserve those animals themselves.
Yes.
Uh, and then for something like the hogs, it would be conservation of private property and a potential what's the word, threat to the food supply.
Right. Right.
And then for the rabbit incidents, we're generally concerned about conserving human health.
Right. 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 Overgrowth of some populations, some species. If you wanted me to get all into it, I could identify a lot of them. But um, as animals die of natural causes or unnatural causes, for that matter, sometimes they wind up in the water because maybe they're super thirsty, or like in the cases of like oh, just vapor locked, like rabies. A lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
when they're with rabies, they tend to avoid water. But anyway, a lot of those animals will wind up in the water, in your water supply, and so then that's a definite threat to human health. It's just downstream. It's all downstream. Of course, humans do stupid stuff as well. There's still folks that their septic runs into the river. So, you know,
Yeah.
tit for tat,
And
tit for tat, I
yeah.
guess. Yeah.
And there's all kinds of incidents. So I've been hiking and you see something where somebody threw a car battery into the creek, like
Yes.
just out in the middle of
Yes.
nowhere, and they just throw their stuff in
Just
the creek.
stupid.
And it's like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anywho, we can be sharing permissions.
Uh, I I think we did. Do you want to do it again?
It's asking host isn't
Well,
allowing multiple presenter.
you do now. You should now. You got it?
Got it now.
Cool, cool.
Let me share this. So this is the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. And so the guy that I was talking to brought this up. And the conversation started. So somebody, a vegan, posted a little clip, like a Far Side thing, about some hunters killed a bunch of wolves to protect so that the wolves wouldn't hunt the elk, right? And so the joke was, oh, good thing we got rid of these predators. Now there's more of these elk for us to kill. And it's kind of like, well, they get killed either way. But anyway, so it commented that the elk population has increased despite there being hunting. And like I immediately thought, like, well, that's true. I've seen some stuff that's true that populations are going up. But I wouldn't argue that it's because that the hunting is the thing that's causing the populations going up, but rather it would be the regulations and limitations imposed on hunting that is the driving force behind the increased population. Because hunting, by definition, reduces population.
Yes. Yes.
So we got into a big long thing about how hunting is conservation. And I hunted as a kid. We grew up hunting. We hunted elk. We hunted not so much deer. My dad didn't hunt deer very much. It was more elk. But my grandpa and I had some uncles who would come in for deer season. And then, of course, we did coyote hunting a lot and rabbits. I've shot my fair share of rabbits. And so I went through, hunter safety courses and all that stuff. And you hear a lot of these slogans that hunting is conservation. I'm talking about the wildlife specifically right now, not so much the feral hogs and stuff.
Right, right,
Which if we get into some topic and that comes because that is an interesting side of it.
right.
So as we talk about it, like maybe some of that stuff will come up that I hadn't thought about yesterday talking to this guy. But you hear a lot of those slogans: hunting is conservation and
Right.
hunting controls overpopulation. And then there are a lot of things like even that when I was a kid, it didn't really make much sense that hunting controls overpopulation. Because it's kind of like, I mean, it you can't say that hunting is conservation and improves population, wildlife population, and then at the same time say it controls overpopulation by reducing population. Like the two things are contradictory. So that never made sense to me. And then another slogan, they have a lot of stuff here on this Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. But another slogan that I've heard is like, uh, people will generally want to hunt the biggest. So elk, for instance, people generally are going to, even though you may not be quote unquote trophy hunting, you're going out there to hunt and you're going to harvest the meat and you're going to eat it and all that stuff. If you pull a bull tag, if you put in for a bull tag, I mean, really the only reason you're hunting bull is for the antlers. And
Okay. I agree.
everything
I
everything else
agree.
is secondary. The whole point of hunting a bull is to try and get the biggest antlers that you can. That's everything else is secondary. Not saying that those things don't come into the equation. The primary concern is the antlers.
For most hunters, I would say
Yeah.
yes to that. When I say most, I don't mean like 51%. I would say maybe for a bull tag, I would say, yeah, 80 to 90%. They want to get the biggest rack they can. I would say also, if see if you how you feel about this. I would say also for the average hunter is not looking there. Maybe they get a bull tag, maybe they don't. For the average hunter, they're looking for meat. And if they get a big rack, awesome. But if not, cool. They still get the meat. But there are the other ilk of hunters that, like you said, if that's what they're going for a big bull tag, they're going for the rack, they're going for the antlers. And I have a problem with that. That's to me, that's yeah, that's not conservation.
But it is argued from the aspect of conservation. So the older bulls are generally going to have the bigger racks, the bigger antlers, right?
Right, right.
And so there's um a notion that, well, by killing the older bulls, some of them are not able to reproduce, right? So if you have an older bull who's in charge of a herd of females and he can't reproduce, by not killing him off, right, you're setting that herd up to not reproduce, and the population isn't going to be as healthy or expand otherwise as it would be. From a purely hunting perspective, the sportsman aspect of that just means there's less hunting permits available next year, so less people can hunt next year. There's less revenue to the state, all of that stuff. But in that aspect, so let's number one, like I've never seen or heard any good reason to believe that older bulls can't reproduce. I'm sure that that's the case for some, but certainly not all of them, right?
Right.
So it would seem to me like if we're concerned about overpopulation and we have this issue where older bulls can't repopulate, can't reproduce, wouldn't it make more sense to only kill the younger bulls? If we're truly concerned about population, about overpopulation levels, instead of having a bunch of people go out and kill a bunch of cows and a few certain number of bulls, wouldn't it make sense to only kill the younger bulls?
Well, if that were the case, yes. So your stipulation is that um, killing younger bulls will control populate the population, the size of the herd.
Yeah.
Is that what you're that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, like if our concern was overpopulation, right? Because that's one of the things that is used um to promote the aspect that hunting is good for wildlife and human wildlife interactions is we prevent their overpopulation. And if they overpopulate, they can um consume all the resources, which has downstream effects on other things, and then we have more animals being hit by cars and yada yada yada, which like to a certain degree I can understand, and to another degree I'm kind of like, eh, so what? Like we're just kind of picking and choosing which animals we want to live and die at that point. But like if our concern was overpopulation, and there's this notion that older bulls, we need to kill the older bulls because they can't reproduce, which allows the younger bulls who would be more genetically apt to reproduce the ability to come in, take over a herd, and now you have population growth because you're allowing that process to happen. So if we were truly concerned about overpopulation and controlling population, wouldn't it make sense to reduce the number of bulls who can reproduce?
Well, yeah, that would make sense. How however, I just want to throw this out there. So there's a couple of things that we would have to stipulate there. One is that older bulls can't reproduce.
Right.
I've
You'd
never,
have to, yeah, you'd have to provide some pretty good evidence that it would be the vast majority of older, which I just don't think is the case.
I've
Like I
never
say,
heard it. Yeah,
I'm sure that there are some instances where older bulls get to the point where they can't reproduce. And however, it's not like there's just one bull in a
right,
herd.
right,
And
right.
by the time that bull gets to that age where they can't reproduce, like more than likely a bull who's 1 or 2 years younger is going to come in and fight him and probably take over anyway. Like, I really don't
Yes,
think
yes.
that that old, an older bull who can't reproduce, I don't see that as being a big effect on elk populations.
Exactly. So I'm not the point I'm trying to make also is that first of all, like I said, we don't. I can't stipulate to, that older bulls can't
Yeah,
reproduce.
yeah, yeah.
However, when a bull gets to the point in his life that when he's the stud, when he's the alpha male,
Hmm.
it's just nature that a younger bull is going to challenge him at some point.
Hmm.
Okay, if he's too old, if he can't fulfill his role, and there's going to be a younger bull who might challenge him for his cadre of females. It's just going to happen. And if the old bull can't hang, then guess what? Old
Yeah,
bull,
it gets,
the younger bull becomes the man, and old bull is just out there hanging out, and waiting to die.
yep,
But
it goes off solo.
there's a natural process there. So yeah, no, I don't.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then speaking of natural processes and population levels, like it has been the case throughout natural history that populations of certain species of animals in certain areas have overpopulated and underpopulated at different times throughout history. Like that is a natural thing that happens. So
Yes.
when it comes to saying, well, we're controlling overpopulation, what we're really saying is we as human beings are stipulating the species of plants and species of animals that we want to see stay alive and thrive.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yes.
what we're saying by saying that. So yeah, so the aspect like that you hear, and I saw it on a couple different things as I was doing my research. There was a video, and that thing came up about, well, older bulls can't reproduce, so by killing them off, we're actually propagating a better genetic future for the. And I'm like, that just doesn't. I don't think
That
that that's true.
we
I
don't
just
have
don't think
proof for
so.
that. There's
Yeah,
no proof for that.
yeah. So Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, hunting is conservation. It's that simple. Man has hunted since he walked the earth. I don't know about that either. Every
Well,
culture
yeah,
relied on hunting for survival. Um, so we could
that's
talk
not
about the
necessarily
definition of
true either.
culture. Through
Yeah.
hunting, man forged a connection with the land and learned quickly that stewardship of the land went hand in hand with maintaining wildlife and their own way of life. A lot of that just seems like emotional gibberish to me.
Yeah, well,
I don't think
that
you
whole
have to.
series can't be taken unless you include farming and the farmer.
Right, agriculture, all that other stuff.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I don't think that I necessarily would have to go out and kill something in order to appreciate nature. Also, like I feel like this argument just boils down to nature pretty though. Like there really isn't a very good argument for
Yeah, I
this
agree.
other than nature's pretty.
I agree.
So they have some, yeah, so they got some good stuff here. So on hunting, why hunting is conservation. So hunting is re, regulated and guided by scientific research. 1878, Iowa instituted the first bag limit on birds. 1934, the first duck stamps. The Pittman-Robertson Act passed in 1937. 11% federal excise tax on sporting arms, ammunitions, and archery equipment, as well as a 10% tax on handguns. And all of that goes towards your local, fish and game wildlife divisions.
What year was it? So the Pittman Robertson Act,
Mm-hmm.
since the Pittman Robertson Act, hunters have contributed over 14 billion. That's how politicians say it, $1 billion
$1 billion.
to conservation just through the taxes and the stamps and so forth and so on. So that's
Yeah.
predominantly where the money comes from for conservation is hunting,
So yes.
fishing, hunting, fishing, both of that.
So as I read this, the guy sent this to me, and
Oh, right,
as
it's
I
right there, 14 billion.
14 billion. Yeah. Uh,
Sorry.
the Robert Pittman Robertson Act, 14 billion specifically for conservation. So as I was reading this,
I had a different source.
something stood out to me. So part of this Robert Pittman Act, I don't know why I have a problem saying this. Pittman Robertson Act is a tax on sporting arms, ammunition, archery equipment, as well as a tax on handguns. Now, I don't know if people know this very well, Dwayne. People don't hunt with handguns. I mean,
That's correct.
not to a large degree.
No,
People
that's correct.
also, when we're talking about sporting arms, we're talking about things like the AR-15, which people generally do not hunt with. There may be some
Right.
varmint hunting and stuff. It's not a main firearm used in hunting. And then we're also talking about other things like my M1A.
Yeah.
That's not a hunting rifle, that's a sporting rifle. So there's an 11% tax basically on all firearm and ammunition sales. So then I had to question, so this 14 billion is all of those sales. So then I thought, well, what portion of this tax is actually coming directly from hunting, right? And that led me to this study.
Mm-hmm.
And so the authors present a novel approach to help answer the question, who really pays for wildlife in the US, using public information about budgets of various conservation, wildlife advocacy, land management, and regarding sources, the Pittman-Robertson Act and Dingell-Johnson Act, federal excise monies from the sale of sporting equipment, the authors contend that approximately 95% of federal, 88% of nonprofit, and 94% of total funding for wildlife conservation and management comes from the non-hunting public.
Mm,
And
interesting.
I thought that's very interesting because it it kind of makes sense. Like the majority of firearm sales are not for hunting purposes. People are not going out and buying a Winchester 308. That's not one of the main purchases. And then we have shotguns. So there's like you have automatic shotguns, or I'm sorry, semi-automatic shotguns like the Benelli, and other things like that. Those are not really hunting. You could use it for hunting, but those are not mainly a hunting rifle or shotgun rather. And so they come down here and they break stuff down pretty well. Um, so they have this broken down so we can see total annual funding. So these are the sources of a lot of this stuff. And then activities funded by Hunter. So they have a percentage of the total, which is in this column. Whoops, you can see the percentages and then the dollar amount, and then activities funded by non-hunting public. So what they did in order to find these percentages of activities is they looked at the total number of licenses, hunting licenses sold for the years. I think it was like 2013 or 2015 or something like that. So the number of licenses, and they said this number of hunters may actually be smaller because some hunters will purchase licenses in more than one state. But the number of hunters based on the number of hunting licenses sold represents about 4%, 4.6% of the total population. So then when it comes to all of this funding sources, and a lot of these are just from your taxes, right? They get taken out of your payroll taxes and all that stuff. And so the Robert Pittman, Robertson, and Dingle Johnson Act funds. So funding based on hunting activities is about 14.5%. So the sales that or the money that's going to wildlife conservation, specifically from this Pittman Robertson Act, the percentage of that actually comes from hunting activities is only 14.5%. And they broke that number down based on the number of sales per type of firearm, and then also for the type of ammunition cartridge. And they have that, it's in here somewhere where they talk about all that stuff. I think it's right here. Yeah. So the next step was so according to the ATF, so they actually got ATF records and figured out the percentage of sales from each thing. And then you also have these excise tax on motorboat fuel, small engine fuels, fishing equipment, tackle, and all that stuff. And then they broke it down by, the type of firearms. So we use the following allocations. Traditional rifles and shotgun sales were allocated to hunting. Modern sporting rifles, including tactical shotguns, were allocated principally, but not exclusively, to non-hunting. So they actually did include some portion of tactical shotguns in hunting. And the result was a combined allocation of 40% of long guns to hunting. Handgun sales were allocated to 5% of hunting based on anecdotal evidence. So it's basically saying, people saying, well, I've hunted, these animals with this handgun. I do know a guy who used to go to Alaska and hunt Kodiak with a 50 caliber revolver. Pretty
I've known
wild
a couple of guys
to
do
think
that as
about.
well.
Yeah, like you know how close you have to get to a grizzly bear to hunt.
Too close, too
Yeah.
close, too close,
He was
too
a little out
close.
of his mind.
Yeah.
And then, of course, all of the breakdown of the ammunition. So, ammunition principally for hunting 243 Winchester, 30-06, 308, and then non-hunting ammunition would be 380. Makes sense. 9 millimeter.
Mostly handgun,
Yeah.
except for the 338 and 50 cal.
Yeah, 338 Lapua and 50 cal. And not to say that people don't hunt with those. But then they have considered for both hunting and non-hunting. So shotgun shells in all gauges, 223 Remington, 5.56, 7.62 by 39, which is a 308. And then large bore Magnum handgun calibers, such as 44 Magnum and a 500 Smith and Wesson. That's what that guy hunted with, was a 500 Smith and Wesson. Yeah, that's
Yeah. 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 You
that's
should look
wild.
that up on YouTube and see how that handgun goes.
Yeah. So
So interestingly enough, is looking back at that and those numbers where where the funding came from, it's not it's not the majority, but if you look at, for example, Ducks Unlimited,
oh yeah,
the Nature Conservancy,
Looking at table one.
The elk people.
Mhm.
Elk people. That sounds like a horror movie. The elk
The
people, the
elk
Rocky
people.
Mountain Elk Foundation,
Mhm.
Audubon National Wildlife Federation. Um, I don't know about the Natural
So the
Resources
only
Defense. I actually know people, I actually know hunters who belong to those organizations. Now, I can't say that's just anecdotal, so
Mhm.
I'm not counting that out. I know Ducks Unlimited for the most part is mostly hunters. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is obviously mostly hunters.
Mostly and you can see the
Um,
percentage right here. So Ducks Unlimited, the
yeah,
funding from Ducks Unlimited,
it's not
99% from
yeah,
hunters.
it's not 2 million, 2.795 million from USDI, Fish and Wildlife. I mean, but
Yeah. So the vast majority, you can see the total for nonprofit is 2,472,000 from
mhm,
nonprofits. From federal funding, it's 18 million. So
mhm.
the nonprofit, even if we want to say, okay, Ducks Unlimited contributes quite a large amount, so does Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
So my question would be
It's
this,
not even close compared to federal tax money.
right? So when we say over here is like total annual funding, then it gives a percentage from hunters. Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine. But where else do you think you get like the wildlife services, U.S. Forest? Where does U.S. Forest Services get their money? They get most of it from appropriations through taxes,
it's federal
but
taxes.
they get money from elsewhere as well. It's probably not a very large thing. So if you want to go into a national forest, then there's sometimes you got to
Yeah,
pay a
you
little
got to
fee to
pay.
come in.
Mhm.
So I don't think that that's a bulk of their funding, but it's a portion. So
Yeah, so just to use
and that would be in the number to the
federal,
right of that what is it, non-hunters? I'm
yeah,
trying to move, I'm trying to move the page down with my finger.
this one right here.
No, it's yeah, non-hunting public. Yeah.
Yeah. So 9 million. So what they did, so the U.S. Forest Service, basically just looked at the total revenue from the U.S. Forest Service, and then based on the population of hunters,
Right.
percentage of the total U.S. population, um, based on hunting licenses sold, that's where they're getting those numbers from.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
the U.S. Forest Service does not collect any revenue directly from hunting activities.
Absolutely.
And neither does the
Absolutely.
the Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife Services. So the vast
Absolutely.
majority of monies that goes towards wildlife management and conservation comes from federal sources. Now, not included in this table, let me see if I can find it. Not included in that table is state funding. Okay, so state funding was not considered in the study in part because most state wildlife agency funding flows from the federal government, and it varies state to state. In Nevada's case, it's about 70%. So 70% of what the state of Nevada gets that goes towards the wildlife agencies comes from federal sources. It would be a task larger than their resources allowed, which it would be, you'd have to go to each state and look through all that stuff. So I can understand how they didn't have money to do that. But it's also generally true that the state funding, e.g., hunter license and tag sales, is rarely adequate to cover the direct cost of administering the related programs. Therefore, state level funding can be reasonably be classified as hunting or sportsman services rather than wildlife management. So I actually took this into question too, and I was like, well, is that actually true? Because that's what we hear a lot, right? Is the sales of hunting and fishing licenses directly goes towards the management and conservation of those animals within the state. So we actually know some people who work for Arizona Game and Fish up here. So
Mhm.
I got a hold of them last night, and of course, it's very short notice, and I'd have a whole bunch of time to ask them questions. And I'm not expecting them to know because they don't really work that side of it. But they sent me to the Arizona Game and Fish website where we can look at a different stuff. And so For the state of Arizona, what percentage of revenue sources comes in? And we can see license and tags makes up about 38% here. That comes in from the state. And then we have the firearm, ammo, and archery makes up 19%, fishing tackle, boat fuel, all that stuff. And you can kind of see it is all. We also have the lottery here in the state of Arizona. They actually use the lottery. A portion of the lottery, I think it's $10 million towards funding some of this stuff. So let me say, okay, so the revenue that the state generates towards wildlife, game and fish management, conservation, all that stuff is 38%. So my question then became, okay, so what is the cost just to run that system of having licenses and tags? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then they directed me to these pages here. All right. So page 18. So this is the Game and Fish Fund. Revenues are received from the sale of licenses, stamps, and other services of the department other than those provided at shooting ranges and are used for any activity of the Game and Fish Commission. So the revenue from the licenses and the stamps goes into the Game and Fish Fund. And it's allocated for any activity of the Game and Fish Commission. So then what the heck is the Game and Fish Commission? So the commission is composed of 5 members appointed by the governor, and the commission appoints the director of the Arizona Game and Fish Department and the director services as secretary to commission, no more than 1 commissioner, blah, 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 each chair. So the question is, well, what the heck do they do? So we can go to their meeting agendas. And so the last one here, August 26, 2024, we can take a look at what they talked about in these agendas. So commission will be presented with a cooperative assessment of BSST Arizona LLC, whatever that is, briefing on petitions to close one road, consideration of proposed recommendation to commission, order 16, quail season dates, length and harvest limits, department evaluation of revenue, hearing on license revocations and violations for Game of Fish. So you can basically see like this commission is kind of like the administrative and legal aspect of running the hunting and fishing and stuff. All right. So coming back to this. So that's what the Game and Fish does. And so we might argue like, well, okay, so part of that commission would be wildlife management and stuff. But if we come down to the next allocation, which is Game and Fish Federal Revolve Funding, these revenues are received from the Dingle, Johnson, Pittman, Robertson grants, U.S. Coast Guard, endangered species programs, other federal grants, and state apportions, and used for sport fish management, hunter safety, wildlife conservation, and boating safety. So, of course, this is going to vary from state to state, but within my state of Arizona, the revenue from hunting license stamps isn't even allocated for wildlife management and conservation. That comes from the from these federal grants. Wow. So then, right. So then we come back up and we go, okay, so the revenue for 2024 is $43,592. Let me pull up my calculator here. I'm sorry, it's 43 million. That's a million. 592. And the percentage that licenses and tags and all that stuff makes up is 38%. So we're going to minus 62% from that. And we're left with 16,564,000.
I was going to say 17.
So yeah, so about 16.5 million is the revenue that comes from the licenses sale of the sale of licenses and stamps and all that stuff. And so then we go, okay, well, how much does it cost just to fund this commission? Well, personal services is almost $16 million, whatever personal services means.
Employees.
employee related expenditures. So the revenue that the state gets from the sale of licenses, tags, and stuff basically doesn't even really cover the cost of just having the system to have licenses and tags. So where is the wildlife management coming in? It's coming in from those federal grants, which is what we saw in table 1 here. So this thing where they said they didn't count the state funding because most of that barely even pays for itself. So that is actually true is for the state of Arizona. It may differ in other states, but probably on a nationwide basis, that's probably the case. Is that the sales of licensings and tags, and it just pays for the system to be in place, because there are physical costs, right? So you have to print out all the pamphlets and brochures. They're actually physical tags that people sell. A lot of stuff is online now, but you have administrative costs, you have legal costs. We saw that in the commission. So they actually discussed the, new regulations on hunting and bag limits, and then prosecuting hunting violations. Then you have the enforcement aspect of it. So we have wardens. They have to be out all year, right? And then probably even doubly so during hunting season. So they're out all year to try and catch and prevent trespassers and poachers and whatnot. And then during hunting season, they're out there to make sure people aren't illegally hunting, killing more animals than what they purchase tags for, or filling other people's tags, or all of that stuff. So just the cost to have licenses is basically paid for by the license. There really is no money left over after that for wildlife management. I see your head going.
Well, yeah, I'm just, it's even in any business, your main expense is always going to be employees. It's just always going to be employees.
Yeah.
So just think of the number of people that are processing the money that comes in from taxes, and at the national level. Think how many employees are up there doing this. I was just kind of going through my mind about, well, you can't have a volunteer force, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But,
What page is this?
it's just really about how you spend your money.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like, I think most states could do with, they can function on what they get from licensing and the things like the map that you showed a little while ago, the chart.
Mm-hmm.
But
Here we go. So for the game and fish department, so this is basically like just the money allocation to basically have buildings, computers, information technology, telecommunications, computer replacement. So basically just like I said, a lot of the licenses and stuff are done online now. You don't really so much have the paper tags anymore. It's done online. But just to have like operation and maintenance for headquarter buildings and all that stuff, $1.2 million total, just to have like buildings and computers and stuff, is $4 million
yeah,
just for that. And then going through here, so this actually like raised my eyebrows here. Christy was like, "You're not going to go start some stuff with Fish and Game, are you?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to start some stuff." But it does make you question. So they're asking $665,000 for cloud services.
yeah, that's ridiculous.
Like, yeah. So I don't. A lot of this stuff is new information to me, and it's kind of alarming to see, and it does it does refute a lot of the stuff that I've grown up hearing. Yeah, so like the hunting licenses and stuff, in the state of Arizona, that revenue isn't even allocated for wildlife management and
Right.
conservation. That money is coming
Right.
directly from federal funds. And then when we saw when you break that down, who's paying for the federal funds? It's mostly coming from the non-hunting public.
Yeah. So in my mind, it's just, I mean, my little mind on our podcast is not going to change the world. Maybe it
Yeah.
could, but I hope it does,
Yeah.
but maybe not. But I would feel way better if the money that comes in, again, as you showed that graph from earlier, you know, the stuff that comes in from tags, from sales, from all of that stuff. I would think that that would be sufficient for the actual activities of conservation,
Yeah,
and
and it's not.
let
I
the
mean,
government buy the building, and let the government. I mean, we're still paying for it, but if you look at it, it's like, there's still a significant chunk of money, but in government, oh man, they're going to come knocking on my door probably with a SWAT team or something. It's like there's waste, $665,000 for cloud services.
oh yeah, I didn't even show you. That's a 300% increase from 2019.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Three, yeah. So I don't know what, people are charging the game and fish department up here, but I feel like they're getting scammed.
It's like that $1,000 hammer for the military.
Yeah.
But
So,
you
but
could
a
go
lot
down
of
to
that,
Harbor Freight and buy one for $4.95. So I'm just saying.
yeah, a lot of that cloud services, well, I don't know how much it is, but my guess would be a good chunk of it is going to go towards all of those online tags. So they have to retain all your information. And
Yes,
then
yes,
when you actually fill a tag, so you actually kill an animal, you have to bring the animal to a fish and game department
yeah,
and have the tag filled out. So a lot of that cloud services is just, each of the individuals, and I can't remember, how many people in the state of Arizona, but it's a lot. There's a lot
yeah,
of hunting licenses sold just in the state of Arizona. So some good portion of that is just maintaining individual information, not to mention all the information that they have to do on tracking herds, population sizes,
yeah,
what the environment is doing, how many predators there are, all that stuff. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Um, so going back to Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation on their page here, so they have some countering anti-hunting arguments. So one argument is hunting threatens wildlife populations, and they say thanks to scientific regulated hunting quotas and procedures established by wildlife biologists and professional big game managers, wildlife species sought by hunters are in fact thriving. Each state wildlife agency uses hunting as a game management tool in line with the North American wildlife conservation model to help manage predator and prey populations alike. And it feels like to me, I mean, they go on here, wildlife managers use scientific data, meticulous hunting regulations, license requirements, hunting seasons. Managers follow up by seeking hunter input. Today's game animals were once considered threatened, exist in a sustainable population throughout the country. How did that happen? It happened due to carefully established regulated hunting requirements. So this was my point there, is like hunting does in fact threaten the wildlife populations, and it is the regulation, it is the limitations that is imposed on hunting that is responsible for the population numbers now. I feel like I can make the case just in their counter to the. I don't think they countered that argument very well. They're in fact admitting it is regulated hunting quotas and procedures. It's regulations, not hunting. Hunting by definition reduces population. What do you think?
Well, I don't think they answered the point very, very well. I think I understand what they're trying to get to, but maybe they should have had somebody else write that.
Yeah. Well, I
Yes.
don't know how
Well,
you
this
can.
in
Yeah.
effect, okay, so just saying hunting threatens wildlife populations. Okay, so uh, what if I go out and I kill one cockroach? That's a threat to the cockroach population. Really? Really? Mm,
I th
That's
so I
wildlife.
mean, yeah, you raise a valid point. Like it's going to depend on what is being hunted. So in the case of feral pigs, like people are out there hunting them, it doesn't really seem to be making a dent
Right.
in the population.
Exactly.
However,
Exactly. However,
how
we're on the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. So
however, yeah, so in 1907, only 41,000 elk remained in North America. So my question would be, well, why is that? Is it because they were hunted down to that population?
probably, yeah, in
Probably.
1907. I mean, used
Right.
to be
So
elk roamed the country. I'm not elk, but buffalo roamed the country wild
in
and
the
free
millions, yeah,
in the
the elk
millions.
too.
Yeah. So what happened in that daytime? There's day and that daylight, that section of time, man, that was food, that was clothing. Yeah. Without regulation, extinction is entirely probable.
The yeah, so I couldn't find it, but like the main cause of species, animal species extinction over the last 2 or 300 years has been hunting.
Hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
main cause of species extinction. And they
Yep.
even acknowledge, hey, listen, in 1907, there was only 41,000 elk. In 1900, there were only 500,000 whitetails. In 1900, there were only 100,000 wild turkeys. In 1901, very few ducks remained. And the issue is those numbers got that low because they were hunted down to those numbers. So hunting does in fact threaten wildlife populations if left unchecked. It is only the limitations that are placed on hunting that have allowed the populations to get where they are.
Hmm.
You can only hunt this many elk this year because we need to leave enough so that the population is larger next year.
Hmm.
Wildlife viewing is
So I
better.
think it's for
Yeah,
that comment though, you have to look at the entire document though. So, going back to that point, so that this is go back to the
down
top,
here.
go back to the
Oh,
top.
up
No, no,
here.
up.
Up, up, up.
So just we have to look at the whole thing. No, no, not that
Yeah.
high. Get back
Well,
down there to
I
where we
don't.
were.
Okay, here. Countering
Right. Okay.
anti-hunting arguments.
Countering anti-hunting arguments. So this is a document in itself. So the first bullet point here, hunting threatens wildlife populations. True, true. They didn't go into answering it very well or making their point. However, later on, they're talking about, okay, so yeah, hunting does threaten wildlife populations. However, populations sometimes need to be controlled. And so I think they make that point a little bit farther down there. And they're stipulating, yeah, absolutely. Just like we mentioned a minute ago, buffalo hunted almost to extinction. Uh,
Yeah.
Elk
And the
almost
elk.
to extinction. So what are they doing for it? So
There are two species of elk that are extinct that were overhunted. One is the eastern elk and the other one is the Miriam's elk.
I
Hunted to
didn't
extinction.
never heard of the Miriam, but I knew about the eastern one. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, hunted to extinction. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So wildlife viewing is better for the economy than hunting. So every time a hunter or a recreational shooter buys a gun. So we went over this. That 14 billion is primarily paid by
Right,
non-hunting activities.
right, right.
Um, Now what that has to do with wildlife viewing, I don't know. I did see some stuff where they're looking to, so the number of hunters has actually decreased since like 1960 or something. The number
That's
of
true.
hunters is decreasing. So that adds to the growing population of animals too. If less people are
True.
hunting them, it would only make sense that the
Yeah,
population of the
yeah,
species would grow.
yeah. And for those of you wondering, so that's a migration towards population centers, people coming into cities. There's
Right.
not the opportunity, there's not the need, with food markets right now. So that's not the need to go out and hunt your own food. So that's agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, there are no fees to view wildlife. Well, that's not exactly true because it's taken out in federal taxes. We saw that in the U.S. wildlife. So if we go back to this table chart
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
so U.S.
yeah, yeah,
Wildlife Services, U.S. Fish, BLM Force, that's all taken out in federal taxes. So there is in
yeah.
fact a charge
Fees,
for viewing
right,
wildlife, and you
right,
also have to
right.
pay to get into most national forests or federal, Yeah,
Right,
federal
right,
parks and
right,
all that stuff.
right.
And then so they talk about the excise tax on trucks, ATVs, boats, and all that stuff. And again, the majority of that money is non-hunting activities as well. So humans do not need to hunt. If there were no hunting and the millions of hunters feeding their families had to suddenly go to the grocery store to purchase beef, pork, poultry, or other meat to replace what they cannot hunt, it would cripple the U.S. agriculture infrastructure and create an immediate food security crisis.
No, I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that either because there are 18 billion animals that are killed or die every year and they never make it to your plate.
Yeah. Now, are those all killed by
That's
people?
worldwide. That's worldwide. So this is
Are they all killed by people?
chickens, turkeys, pigs, sheep, goats, and cows. So they can die
Or
from
disease,
disease or predators or whatever the
predators?
case.
Absolutely.
But we grow them specifically for food.
Right.
18 billion across the world. So the idea that, well, if people stopped hunting, we would cripple, no, like just in the waste produced alone, we could feed those people. That doesn't make any sense. All this is done sustainably in a fashion that ensures these game animals will be around for years to come. And again, the only reason that it's sustainable is because there are limitations, not because people are hunting them. It's because we are limiting what people can do during hunting. Hunters are dangerous to humans and pets. So they go here to say individuals who target dogs, cats, other pets, livestock, or people with archery equipment or firearms are not hunters. They are criminals acting illegally and should be reported to authorities. Hunting should not be confused with poaching, which is the illegal taking of wildlife, including hunting without a license. Poaching is hunting without a license. So, in their own thing here, they define the illegal activities that they just said are not hunting as hunting.
Uh, okay, so I think we're splitting hairs there. If you go out and you shoot an animal, you don't have a license. All right.
And I mean,
So
if we just define the word hunting,
what they're talking about is the culture of hunting, the act of hunting. So I'd
well,
say a guy that drives down the road and sees the deer on the side of the road at night, pulls out his spotlight and caps that deer. Was he hunting that deer? No,
well,
maybe, but seriously doubt it. We don't know. So
the
that's
definition the
we could argue
definition of
that.
hunting is the
Yeah.
activity of hunting wild animals, especially for food or sport. So it doesn't matter if you're doing it legally or illegally. The act of killing the animal, either for food or for sport, is hunting. There is
Okay.
legal hunting
And
and there is illegal hunting.
well, okay. So
I get,
again,
I get what they're,
so we're down to the semantic of they didn't. So
but I
their
think the
sentence isn't
semantics are important.
the sentence wasn't correctly phrased. So let's I you have to stipulate what the
Certain
point they're making.
certain hunters, not all hunters, are dangerous to humans and pets.
Thank you.
So
Yes,
it
that would be
certainly
better.
is, yes, it's that would be much better. So
Yes.
it certainly is the case that there are people who do, kill dogs, cats, whatever for sport,
Right.
and they do it out of season, they do it without a
Right.
license, but that is hunting. You can't you can't change the definition of hunting. So this is worded poorly. I don't think it's a very good counter argument to this. Certain hunters can be dangerous to human pets. Hunters can't be trusted, and this goes into this one. Like, I think the vast majority of hunters are probably fairly trustworthy. I mean, I don't think that everyone who's going out elk hunting wants to see the elk extinct. I don't
Right.
think that's you know what I mean? And I certainly
Agreed.
think you probably could hire them for your small business. You know what I mean? Like, it's, I don't know who's saying hunters can't be trusted, but that's a ridiculous argument.
Right. Right.
Hunting disrupts the ecosystem and nature will take care of itself. So in 1776, human population was 2.5 million, and it was just along the Atlantic Ocean. Today, it's approximately 326 million, stretches from coast to coast. North American wildlife model, uh, management practice of predator and prey alike. Model dictates that fish and wildlife belong to all Americans and need to be managed in a way that their populations will be sustained forever. Additionally, hunting pays for wildlife conservation. We've already seen that it doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't do that. So this is a wild concept here that I think that I might have a wild take on this. So as far as like nature taking care of itself, um, so there is just a ton of death and suffering that happens in nature. And so my take on this natural thing, because I get a lot of people who will argue with me about the vegan thing as well, you know, lions take down gazelle or whatever the case may be. And my take on that is like, yeah, I think that's bad too. And I think that we should intervene on that. And so some aspect of that, I think that probably what needs to happen is just basically like placing all natural animals under human like captivity supervision. So basically like wildlife sanctuaries and stuff. So we would take the elk and the deer and they would have their own sanctuaries. And again, like is this feasible, whatever? Like probably not. But in an ideal situation, uh, we have world A, which is the one we exist in now, and world B, which is would be the ideal situation. So if we could put them all in captivity and prevent the prey from being hunted and torn to shreds by predator, I think that would be better than allowing them to be hunted and killed and torn to shreds by predators. And then the same aspect, the predators, uh, we have this whole aspect of lab grown meat coming up. And so there's an ability to feed the predators without having to kill additional animals. We could also do some form of like genetic modifications and convert carnivorous animals to herbivorous animals. So I think there should be research done into that area. So what do you think of that? What do you think about that?
Bro, I can't follow you there. I can't
Mm,
follow you there. So first of all, let's take carnivores and predators, and we're going to recreate them in man's image. And then we're going to put all these. What about people? Hey, we should put people in some protected wildlife areas and just, because we want to control them too. It's just, I can't go with that, man. I understand where you're going, but yeah,
why would
I
we put
can't. I
people? Why
can't.
would we put
Well,
people?
it's
Why would we
we're
put people in
animals.
there?
We're animals too. I mean, where do we stop the line? So we're concerned about animals and their psychological well-being. Well, we're worried about people's psychological well-being. Let's put them in places. Bro, I'm sorry. There's just parts of that plan I can agree with, and parts of the plan I
Are
can't. That's
are
safe for
people
another
being
podcast.
are people being hunted?
Not, yeah,
No,
heck yeah, on the streets. Oh, heck yeah. Oh, not for
by other
food, but
people. By other
yes, of
you're talking about?
course.
Okay. So that's
Dude.
a so we already take the people who hunt other people and we put them in a form of containment, don't we?
Yeah, yeah. We can maybe we can
Okay.
correct them at the DNA level. You just change their
You-
DNA. Bro,
Maybe.
I'm just poking at you. I'm poking at you. But there's some parts of that are good. I can see that, and then there's other parts that I can't see. Some of that I can just agree with you. And you said up front, it's kind of okay. This may be kind of way out there, but world A and world B. Uh, I want to read something to you. Okay, I'll read this
Mhm.
to you real quick. So, an intelligent conversation, which I think we've had so far, and exchange of ideas, and I think we're both on the same page for almost everything. And but there are people out there who put things out in social media and even in conversation day to day. And this is a piece here I'm reading, and it's like they're leaps and bounds that people take that without proof. So we've looked at the data, and it's a new understanding. It opens my eyes, at least for the state of Arizona, for sure. But just listen to this for a second. killing animals is not vegan and it is not ethical. The overpopulation of deer is a result of the human caused killing of natural predators and habitat destruction. In the long term, fauna habitats would have to be replenished. Note that predators like wolves and bears were hunted into extinction to protect livestock and habitats cleared to make room for mostly feed crops. Urban systems can be designed with nature-based solutions that mitigate natural disruptions, such as animal bridges over highways, green spaces, etc. In the short term, I believe sterilization would be the most humane and least invasive option. It worked for stray dogs, which used to be a rampant problem. So that alone has so many leaps that can't be, none of that, yeah, prove most of that. You just can't. So in social media, I think that you see a lot of that stuff where people say these things. It's like, well, first of all, natural predators of deer are still out there. It's not by extinction. Wolves and bears are not extinct. You see, so just people put stuff out there, and I understand the point he's trying to make, but he's not doing a very good job of it. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I had to throw that out there. It's like I see that, and I'm like, I can't take him seriously. You know, sorry. No, I can take you seriously. Don't misunderstand. But there's just stuff out there that we got to get to the data, which we just did as far as the state of Arizona, where's the money's coming from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah. So I'm just gonna quote something here. This is Isaiah 65, verse 25. The wolf and the lamb will feed together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox, and the dust will be the serpent's food. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, says the Lord. So I feel like my version of what should happen in the natural world is more closely aligned with that. And I believe in the Bible. I believe God's word. And so that's where I'm basing my thing on. So if the Lord says that's what's going to happen, I'm not really sure why we shouldn't strive to work towards that.
I'm of the same belief, and I'm not saying we shouldn't strive to get toward that. However, there's some extraordinary means. I think that God's going to have to take care of some of that himself. This gives us an opportunity to have another podcast on this.
Yeah.
You're wondering about what we're going to talk about next week.
Because then my question goes, well, what other aspects of your life do you say that?
Well, what species do we stop at?
None.
Like, okay, so should cockroaches just run rampant?
No.
Lizards? I mean,
no.
Okay. So, aren't they God's creatures?
Yes. Didn't God give us dominion over the animals?
Yes.
Didn't he tell us to be fruitful, multiply, go into the earth and subdue it?
Yes. So at what point do we stop subduing animals? I mean,
we don't.
Okay. This is good stuff, people. If you're not catching this, and just because our screen is divided does not mean Coach Lambie and I are divided.
We are not divided.
We are a unit.
Yeah. So there's aspects of like the veganism stuff where they say hunting is not vegan. And that's, I think if you follow that route, that leads to some pretty wild, bullets that person has to bite. So in the aspect of like the feral hogs that we were talking about earlier, I certainly think that if they were not hunted, that has an impact to threaten human thriving and surviving.
Yes. Yes.
So
And just
some
and
hunting, yeah, so some hunting I think probably is beneficial for humans.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna also say that is like it doesn't happen as much, but in the case of the feral hog, which maybe that's just a well, anyway, feral hogs, there's a story behind that. It's a long story, but it's where how that population came to be. But the point being
Mhm.
is, um, I have not. However, I used to work in. That'll make sense in a second. So I used to work in an urban area, and that eventually started having uh, feral hogs, a whole herd of feral hogs at the outskirts. There was like some not wilderness area, but wooded area along a lake, and there was just wooded area out there. Just prime area for feral hogs to be rooting around. And feral hogs began to make their way into neighborhoods. Okay, so what I said a second ago said I have not, but I know of people by name, if I had to, who have been attacked, charged by feral boar hogs.
Mhm.
That is a danger to a human being because
Mhm.
hogs are fast, they're mean, they're just going to hurt you.
Yeah. And the same aspect
So,
would go for anything. So like in those
absolutely,
cases, yeah,
absolutely.
in those cases, if we just trade out feral hog with human beings, so in the aspect where it's a hog who's threatening the life of an individual, we replace that hog with a human being, and we would not in that instance say, well, you can't defend yourself. You should just let that person kill you. So in the
Exactly.
same in the same respect, you're talking about self-defense there, and that goes for all of the and
Exactly.
let's talk about that the hogs threatening the food supply. So they're destroying farmland and crops and killing off cattle, sheep, whatever the case may be. They're a threat to the food supply. Let's replace those hogs and let's, for hypothetical purposes, say that there exists some primitive form of human beings whom we can't communicate with, and you have attempted to deter them from coming across the border, right? Let's say they live in a different country. From you can't deter them from coming across the border, and they continue to destroy your crops, and they continue to be a threat towards your life, the life of the population of your country and everything. Are you then do you have the right then to defend the lives of your country and your family members and stuff by killing those people
Absolutely.
to prevent? Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
If you're under direct
right. Yeah.
threat.
Yeah. Yeah. So any threats to the current food supply system, because we're not replacing some portion of that agriculture with the hogs. You know what I mean? Like you
Right,
can't, you're
right,
not going down to
right.
the store and like, oh, here's feral hog ribeye or whatever, like
Yeah,
that's not
yeah.
the case. Yeah.
No.
So any threat to the food supply system can surely be managed by killing them.
Right.
And I think if we, in that scenario, if you were to replace it with human beings from another country, right? Let's say that whatever the evil axis of villainy that was in World War II, right? So Japan invades and they start like flying over and carpet bombing all of our crops and stuff. Are we allowed to fight back? Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. So yeah, so vegans who think like, oh, no hunting should be permitted, like that's a wild take. You have to bite some serious bullets on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So all right, good stuff. Yeah, interesting topic there on hunting being conservation. I don't see a good case being made that it is conservation. I think most of the conservation and management um, is coming from federal tax dollars. So
I would
be
like to
that as it
say
may.
this. I would like to say this in closing about that is that I'm in agreement. However, just from the heightened awareness, no matter what adjective or verb you attach to it, I think that more and more people who do hunt are more aware and at least make efforts to they're just not out there killing things willy-nilly. I think there was a time in our country, I don't know about the world, but in our country, where people just shot animals just to do it. And I shot him.
Yeah, that's why those numbers were so low.
Yeah, and I think that through time, at least one thing that's come out of, I think maybe our evolution as far as, sportsmen or hunters or whatever, I think that there is a heightened awareness of respect. Can I say that? Respect for wildlife. And so you just don't go out and shoot something for willy-nilly, like we talked about the antlers on a bull elk. I expressed my views. It's like, if you're a hunter, you're not shooting something unless you eat it. That's your whole purpose of doing that. If you're just out, sorry guys, if you're just out there looking for a set of antlers to hang on your wall, I'm not on your team. Not there. Sorry. You're gonna get a sailfish just so you can stick it on your wall. No.
Yeah, the aspect of sport hunting.
Yeah, is a little bit
that's
distasteful.
That's even a different topic, because there are, I don't know. Yeah. I don't even start another conversation.
No. Yeah. maybe next time. Anyway, I just wanted to say that this is good stuff. It's great conversation. I think we proved some things today. I think we made a point to put light on some things as well. This was a good topic.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, a little bit different than our normal topics, but it seemed fun to discuss. I think it's something not many people really think about.
Nope. Does have to do with nutrition.
Kind of, a little bit. So.
And health.
Yeah. It's good to get outdoors and go hiking and stuff and see some wildlife. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good for you. All right. That is it, man. Hope you guys get something from this. I hope some minds were blown. We will see you guys next time. Coach Lambian doing out.